what is criticism. Now, whenever we say criticism, we think it is to criticize a text or to find fault. Now, finding fault is not at all criticism. Criticism is to say what we like or what we don't like, what we find interesting, what we don't find interesting, what we see as something that is good, bad, not necessarily binaries, but somewhere in between. The gray area are also included here. And when we say when we like something or we don't like something, we also need to justify. We can't just make a sweeping statement that this text is good or this movie is bad and then get away with it. We need to support it with as clear evidence as possible, and also, justify why we say that. And we are entitled to our opinion. So this is absolutely a democratic area of study, and therefore criticism does not mean to find fault with something. Of course we can, but it is not only finding fault. It is finding out what is there in a piece of art. So I'm putting it as art. I'm not categorizing literature alone. So criticism can be across domains. Even when we get a medical prescription from a doctor, we can be critical about it. If not anything, at least the handwriting of doctors. So we can be critical. When we say critical, we are being, to some extent, judgmental. So critical analysis is an in-depth examination. As I said, it should be supported by evidence. When we say something, we should show proof of presence of something, presence of that particular idea within the purview of that literary work. And very often it is not an argumentative essay, it's an extended persuasive essay, because eventually what we say, we must be able to convince the reader or convince our audience. So in that sense, it is persuasive, more persuasive and less argumentative. So this is just a brief introduction to what criticism per se is and what critical studies can, or what the scope of critical studies can actually encompass. So why should we critique a text? A text has no life if there are no readers. When we read, we can't just read a book, close it, put it back in the shelf and move to the next one. There should be some kind of a processing that happens when we read a text. Otherwise, the text remains, empty pages or printed pages within the framework of the front and the back. The text comes alive only when it is read. So there is something that we would want to say about what we feel about the text. And that opinion, that expression of opinion, why does the author say this, or why does the character do what it does? So what if it is like this? So these are questions that we need to raise, we need to interrogate with the text, with the author, with fellow readers, so that we get a complete picture, or at least in our opinion, a kind of a picture that convinces ourselves, convinces us and convinces others on what point we are trying to express. So these are some of the basic things that any research, any literary research has to contain in its purview. To say what we want to say about the text, we need a supporting argument. Now it's not enough if we just say, oh, I like the movie because the movie contained ABCD items. It did not contain EFGH items, and therefore I like them. Now, how do we say that whether the movie is, or the literary text that we are dealing with, the literary text that we have read, can be classified as among, not necessarily the best, but one among the good ones. So if we want to place it in a certain context, we need to support our arguments with an already existing idea that is being generated in the society. Now, most of these theories have evolved in the society. They are not individual. No individual has come up with a theory. Whatever theory exists in this world of literature, has been generated from the ideas that society has has come up with over a period of time. Now, this is where theory becomes important in allowing us to frame our opinion and support our opinion about a literary text. So this theory, alongside our opinions, theory-supported opinions, that becomes the starting point of our research, for any literary research. Now, when we look at these theories, we can say that they can be classified into 4 groups. So there are one set of theories which are author-oriented, some are text-oriented, some are context-oriented, and some others are reader-oriented. This is by and large, these theories actually refer to the traditional ones. I'm not bringing in the modern, the latest trends into this framework. This is how theory evolved from classical times to probably the beginning or the middle of 20th century. This is how theory evolved. So let's look at how theory evolved from those times, and let's look at how theory has actually moved from classical times to probably, the new criticism. Till that point, how theory evolved and how theory moved. Let's take a brief look at the history. So when we look at author-oriented approach, the English critical tradition from Philip Sidney to T.S. Eliot is predominantly being author-oriented. So authors who have also doubled up as critics, or authors who have critiqued on their own writings. So you have Philip Sidney, who was a great poet, but his idea of criticism was with poetry per se and not on any specific text. So his argument was very similar to what Aristotle said with reference to Plato's views. So Sidney also defended literature, he defended poets, and he said that literature and poetry must remain in society. Without literature, without art, the society will become dull. And therefore, a very energetic society will always produce literature, and he defended poetry. So that sense, he's not necessarily a critic, but he was someone who defended poetry, defended literature, and therefore we can say that from him, this meta-literature, this meta-reading of literature began. And then following Sidney, there weren't many other critics until Dryden arrived in the scene. Both Dryden and Samuel Johnson were excellent critics because they spoke about the writing of others. So in that sense, they were the pioneers of English critics. So Dryden wrote about Chaucer, Boccaccio, and many other writers. He commented on their writing, and he also said, how writing has to be, rather than merely saying what is there in their writing, which is what Samuel Johnson did. With Wordsworth and Coleridge, we find another change, another departure from the school of Dryden and Johnson. They critiqued about their own writing. They did not bother about what others wrote. Wordsworth had to say how he wrote his poetry, how he composed his poetry, what made him compose his poems in a certain way. Similarly, Coleridge, what are the ingredients he has added? How has he differed from Wordsworth? So this is what we find in their critical writings. Now, when we move to Arnold, T.S. Eliot, Samuel Johnson also comes into this category. They have commented on others' writings. So Arnold has identified what he called as purple passages, touchstones of poetry. And he said, he brought in this element of comparison. Now these are fantastic writings. Now let's place newer writings alongside and see where they stand. So he brought in 2 elements. One is comparison and the other is evaluate. So until then, this idea of evaluation never existed. It was Matthew Arnold who first brought in this idea of evaluation. So he wanted to evaluate writers and say which writers or which writings are comparable to the purple passages in literature. With T.S. Eliot, we move to another direction. He says every critic is only the next brick that is placed in constructing of a building. So he wanted this historical sense. So in a sense, my presentation also takes its roots from T.S. Eliot's historical sense. So he said we should not forget what has happened before. We should always have that in mind. Only then we will know what has not been done so that we can take a newer approach. So novelty begins only with the knowledge of this history. So with all these authors, with all these critics who have also been authors, their view of writing has a completely different, not just approach, but also a completely different flavor. So they know what it takes to writing, they know what difficulties writers face, and they were able to critique other writers based on their understanding or their abilities to present their own literature. Now the next one is text-oriented approach. Now with text-oriented approach, the author was completely eliminated from the scene. So this is a complete departure from the earlier schools. As Roland Barthes clearly puts it in structuralism approach, the death of the author, the moment the book is released, the moment the book is published, the author is eliminated from the scene. The author is relegated to the margin. So the text, what we want to know, is contained within the scope of the text, the front and the cover page and the back page. Within that precinct, what we want to know is completely contained. So whether it's Cleon Brooks or Alan Tate, new criticism, Russian formalism, they are actually two sides of the same coin. One is American and one is Russian. So clearly reflects the Cold War scenario, how the world was divided between them. So they looked at everything within the text. So the author, Samuel Johnson's idea of the author's childhood or the author's life actually influencing the writers don't come into this picture at all. So they look at the text, the author is taken away from the scene, irrespective of who has written it. What is written is what that writers. So all these approaches, structuralism looks at how language plays a key role in conveying certain emotions, or how dialogues play an important role there, stylistic, post-structuralism. So language becomes the focus, the choice of words, choice of diction, all these become the focus. These are not again anything new, because when we look at classical criticism, Horace has placed very important, Horace's Ars Poetica places very significant emphasis on diction. So the choice of words is what determines your ability to communicate appropriately. So formalism, structuralism, stylistics, in fact, are, or even practical criticism, Ray Richards' practical criticism, all these are, you can say, direct descendants of Horace's and Longinus's view of literature. Post-structuralism, Foucault or deconstructionism by Derrida, they look at the bigger picture. They do not look at it, as what new critics do, the paradoxes, the images, or even practical criticism, the 7 types of meaning. All these, they do not look at individual components. They look at the big picture. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle that are, placed in such a way that the picture emerges at the end. So that is what deconstructionism tells us. So they are looking at snapshots within the text, and they are not looking at the small parts making up the whole, or the whole is composed of each component parts, as Ulrich says in his definition of poetry. So we are not, as far as the deconstructionists or the post-structuralists go, they are not looking at the individual components. They are looking at the big picture that has emerged eventually by the combination of all these small parts. After the text-oriented approach, or alongside, some of them emerged even before the text-oriented approaches came into the scene. So we have these different context-oriented approaches. Now, when we say context-oriented, you're looking at a literary text from a particular socio-political and economic point of view. It could be psychological point of view. If you look at it as Freudian views, and then you look at literature from a Freudian perspective, then it becomes psychoanalytic criticism, where you look at how emotions are played, how relationships are evolved, the mother-son relationship or the father-daughter relationship, as the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex talk about. And then you also have feminism and queer theories, where gender becomes the focus of your view of the entire text. To give you a small example for this, all of us have read Nazim Ezekiel's Night of the Scorpion. So that one poem lends itself to almost all these approaches, all these context-oriented approaches. The woman at the center, everyone seated around her. It's if that is not feminism, what is feminist studies? Women being accused of the sins that she committed in the past, or sins in this birth, or washing away the sins for her future, the next birth. So people accusing her. There is this father who has absolutely no, he doesn't make any qualms about lighting fire to her foot, the place where the scorpion had bitten her. So you have all kinds of, the author's description of the crowd that comes in like swarms of flies. So there is a clear distinction between the upper class and the lower class, and how he feels about the peasants. So that is Marxism for you. So every context, the socio-economic context, the socio-cultural context, they're coming with lanterns. The scorpion is treated as evil. Scorpion is just another creature like any of us. We look at it in eco-criticism. So to consider the scorpion evil is, how are we entitled to do that? So these are all questions that raises. As you read the text, you'll be able to place these contexts within the framework of the text. So your approach to reading the text is based on any of these contexts. So in fact, this entire poem can be read as an example or an extension of Oedipus complex. So the author says, I remember the night. So it is not something that happened today, it's something that happened long time back. So if you look at how it evolves, and finally the mother says, thank goodness the scorpion spared my children and bit me. The pain for her lasted for only 24 hours. This, whoever the young boy or an old boy, young girl or old girl, whoever the person was, has endured the pain of seeing the mother being treated like this for so many years. So this is in some way mother-child relationship. So that Freud automatically comes in when you look at the entire poem this way. So this is how we take the support of theory to understand, analyze, and interpret the text. So we look at environment and literature a little later. Right. The fourth approach is reader-oriented approach. Here, this is a completely new dimension to literary studies because the author is eliminated. Now, the context is also eliminated. We are looking only at the text and the reader. So for the first time, literary criticism over the years has considered the reader also within the loop of literary studies. Otherwise, it's only the text, the author, what the text tries to say, what the author tries to say. And if we try to put our own views in the mouth of the author, then it becomes intentional fallacy or effective fallacy, as the new critics would put it. But for the first time, the reader's autonomy to interpret the text, to read the text and analyze the text in the manner that they want was first supported by the reception and reader response theory. Now, the reason why I bring Indian literary criticism here is because all that we have seen here was already said in Natya Shastra, Bharata's Natya Shastra, where they talk about Rasa, Dhvani, and Rasika. Rasa is the emotion, the expression of that emotion. Dhvani is applying meaning to that emotion, and not the denotative meaning, but implied meaning. And Rasika, when the audience understands, when the reader understands the text exactly the way the author has intended to convey, the meaning that the author has intended to convey, then the Rasika and the author, or in Natya Shastra, it's the dancer. The dancer and the audience have what are called as Sahridaya. Sahridaya means same matching heart. So what I feel, what I intended to convey, what I have conveyed, and what the audience has understood are on the same. When it is only when that happens that you can say that text is successful in communicating what it wanted to convey. So this is something that has already been talked about 2000 years earlier in Bharata's Natya Shastra. So the entire gamut of Western criticism falls literally flat when we consider Indian literary criticism, because Indian literary criticism has gone beyond this. In fact, what we talk about today has already been spoken about in Indian literary criticism. We'll see that as we move ahead with our presentation. So here I'm giving one sample of how a theory, the assumptions of the theory, and the text can be connected. So when we are able to see, we need to understand the assumptions of these theories and see how they are reflected in the text. When we are able to match them, and if we are able to justify based on the theory what the author has said, if we are able to bring both of them together, then our research or our literary research has taken shape. We can say that they have taken shape. They have taken perfect shape. Now in eco-criticism, oikopoetics, again, this is not anything new, because even if you take Tirupavai or the Tinai literature, if that is not eco-literature, what is? So, the 5 landforms and literature connected to that landform, reflecting the ethos of that particular landform, that is oikopoetics. And if that is not eco-literature, what is? So that is Indian literatures, in Tamil literature in particular, is a very good example of eco-literature. So you look at how life forms are interlinked, you look at how they are treated within the space of a particular character, in a particular event in literary text, how land influences emotions, actions, then the biological themes, the relationship between human beings and the flora and fauna. Something that has been missed out is Shakespeare's King Lear. When King Lear is out in the open, when he moves out of Goneril's house, he's out in the open, there is a storm that is blowing outside. Now that is symbolic of the inner storm that is going on within him. So that is that. Of course, Keats calls it pathetic fallacy. But how does King Lear respond? He says, let them anatomize Regan and see what breathes about her heart. So he wants to know how heartless his own daughter is. That is something that, reflective of the kind of lack of calmness inside him, and which is reflected in the storm that blows inside. So this kind of relationship, we still look at it only as a play. We do not look at it as a reflection of the ego component within the scope of King Lear's character. Now, if we bring that, then that falls within the scope of eco-criticism. So, role played by literature in the ecology of human species, especially with human and inanimate. The general belief, at least till the mid-20th century, is to consider human being at the center, and every other organism exists to serve the human being, the anthropocentric. That is flawed. So eco-literature defeats that entire belief, and it sustains this biodiversity. Every organism has a right to exist on Earth as much as human beings. In fact, to state that is also wrong. Human beings exist, all other organisms also exist. Just as we have the right, they also have the right. So this kind of equanimity is what comes within the scope of eco-literature and therefore eco-criticism. So now we move to the recent trends. Now, recent trends, I won't say begins with memory studies, but memory studies has suddenly, especially during the COVID times when people talked about Spanish flu and how the lockdown happened during those times, suddenly memory studies came into the picture. The entire society started remembering old things. And that is when memory studies, IIT has a department, has a particular chair for memory studies. IIT Madras has a specific chair for memory studies. And they were looking at how society evolved over a period of time without losing touch with its previous generation. How it has been a continuous flow. And it is not a departure from anywhere. It is only a continuous flow like the river. It collects the soil from different geographical locations, and what it eventually drops in the ocean is a combination of all these. So that kind of triggered, and especially the COVID period and the times preceding the COVID era, that is what triggered memory studies. And then we have this interdisciplinary approaches where people belonging to other disciplines, not necessarily literature, have taken to writing. So doctors have become authors. Even authors who are not doctors but have encountered, a hospital environment, producing that in their writings. You have engineers as authors describing scientific inventions. You have the skiffy studies. So many, apart from socio-economic, political, which were the dominant, force in 20th century, 21st century looks at completely different approaches to literary study. So it is a combination of literature with other disciplines, other domains. So you have the overlapping of science with literature, you have overlapping of technology with literature, post-humanism with artificial intelligence bombarding the scene. So you have human technology interface, the kind of interaction that we have with ChatGPT. In fact, you also have courses on how to give prompts to ChatGPT to elicit the right kind of response that you want. If you had watched the World Cup, the T20 World Cup, T20 that is sponsored. The Tamil commentary is sponsored by ChatGPT. So to that extent, ChatGPT has become part of our existence. And then, of course, digital literature. We look at all these in greater detail. So now with memory studies, as I just said, the assumptions are very, very interesting. Number one, it is socially constructed. We are not looking at individual memories. Individual memory, even if we do, is a product of the social memory, the social or the cultural memory. The reason why I say this is because the way we celebrate functions, or not even celebrating functions, happen once in a while. Everyday life at home, what your parents did, they transition that to you, and what you do, you take it to the next generation. What your parents did is actually evolved from what their parents did. So how a particular idli or dosa or whatever food that is made at home, how it is made depends on how your mother has learned it or how your father has learned it from their superiors, their parents. So your mother does something in a certain way, the daughter or the son also does the same thing in a similar way. They are more comfortable doing it. So that is passing down memory from one generation to another. Now that is within the family. Now, this same thing is extended. After all, a society is a group of families. That's how we define a society. So, when a particular social group, it can be a community, it can be a religious community, it can be a social community, an ethnic community, they get together to do certain things in a certain way, certain rituals or certain functions, celebrations, festivals. Now, all these are, passed down from one generation to another through memory. Now, without memory, this cannot be passed down. Now, that triggered the idea of memory studies and looking at how this memory is passed on within the scope of a literary text. So, Morris Hobart is one of the pioneers in this field, and his collective memory, it's a departure from Carl Jung's collective unconscious, where forgetfulness was the focal point. Here, collective memory, how society has evolved from where it was, is only because memory has been inherently, generated, moved from one generation to another. Now, this memory is selective, yes, and that's the reason why there is change. We do not practice certain things the way our parents did. They did not practice certain things in a way that their parents did. So over a period of time, there's so much of changes that have been happening. Our parents have probably used charcoal for cooking. We used gas, and today it's air fry or microwave or what do you call it? One pot cooker. So over a period of time, as technology advances, we've also been changing our lifestyle. Now, these are reflected in literature. These are not reflected just in our everyday life. These are reflected in literature. In fact, there is a very beautiful book by Shivashankari, Tamil author, Palangal. She talks about 3 generations. One ancient generation with all its very orthodox practices. The next generation who have moved to America, they grew up in India but have moved to America, and a third generation of children who were born and brought up in India. So you can see the change. Now, certain things remain the same, but there are certain things that have undergone the change. The changes that have undergone are purely a product of memory being selective. So not everything was passed down to a generation. Some have been improvised, some have been modified, some have also been forgotten. And that is why the change actually happens. So we can look for these clues within the literary text. It's my dynamic and it's changeable. Yes, that's what I said just now. It is mediated through representation. It's mediated through representation, because here we can see that our understanding of our own place, why a particular place is called so. The place where our college is located is Meenambakam, Palavantangal. Now, when you say Tangal, when you say Pakam, it all refers to the fact that there was a water body there. So, Tangal is a place where water is held. Tangal in Tamil means to hold something. So, it is a place where there has been a water body. Today, of course, it's all covered and huge buildings have been raised. So, again, these are forgotten ideas, but it still remains alive, in the names of those places. Chrome pet, for example. Leather industries were popular those days. Chrome is a form of leather. It's a product of leather, and therefore the place is called Chrome. So similarly, every place is named after a certain reason. We have forgotten them, but the name itself contains the memory of the particular reason. Similarly, monuments, museums, so many memorials, film, media, all these have been able to transmit this memory from one generation to another, one society to another. Now, these representations, they shape how we understand the history of our own place. It's also linked to identity. The way we celebrate, as I said earlier, the way we celebrate a certain festival, or celebrate national events. Now, all these are reflective of our identity. So, what we do on Independence Day or Republic Day, what we do on days when we won certain wars or the Kargil War, what we do on those days, how we remember on Gandhi Jayanti or Martyrs Day, what we do on those days is reflective of our identity as an Indian. To give you a small example, yesterday when we were watching the T20 World Cup final, I was immediately reminded of 1983 World Cup win in England. Kapil Dev led Indian team. Those days we didn't have TV, so we heard only commentary. And even today, my memory of Kapil Dev running backwards to take the catch from Vivian Richards to get him out. My memory, it tells me I almost ran along with Kapil Dev. I mean, I could imagine Kapil Dev so close to my eyes, but when I see the videos of that particular catch, the video shot from such a distance and Kapil Dev looking like a miniature doll running, I could never relate to. My memory of that is what I heard and what visuals I created in my own view. So that is what memory studies is all about. My understanding of a particular event is different from how the event actually happened or how it is being captured. Now that is what we mean by memory through representation. How that particular memory is represented through the video and how that memory was represented in my visual imagination. A similar thing happened when I watched the first Harry Potter movie. When I read the Harry Potter series, my understanding or my imagination of Harry Potter or the different characters, Hogwarts, school, or even the Dursleys' home was very different from what was projected on the screen. So I could not relate to it at all. Similarly, recently, Ponniyin Selvan, something that came up a couple of years back. When I read Ponniyin Selvan as a young college student, when it was published in the weekly, Kalki, our imagination of Arulmozhi Varman or Kundavai or Punguzhali was one of my most favorite characters. But the way I imagined them was very different from the way they were represented in the movie. I'm not finding fault. This is probably the director's perspective. What we read and what we understood or what we imagined is very different. Now, when we try to compare or when we try to analyze our memory with what is being projected and what Kalki has written or what he has described in his novel, now this becomes the focus or this becomes the actual crux of a literary research based on memory studies. Memory and power are interconnected, absolutely. Now, why I say this is because George Orwell has written an essay called Writing of History. So when Hitler in the 1940s, Hitler's radio repeatedly kept broadcasting that London is bombed and London is destroyed. But those in London know that neither was it bombed nor is it destroyed. If Hitler survived, had Hitler not been, he committed suicide, but had he not been dead, had he ruled over and had he won the war, the London bombs would have become part of our history. But because the Allies won, the truth has emerged. That is what memory is. How they. That becomes very crucial in political scenario today. So many things are forgotten easily because people's memories. There are so many things that we have to remember that something that happened in the past easily forget. And this is what the power centers try to capitalize on. This is election season and you try you listen to all these election speeches, they would forget what they had done when they were in power, or the present incumbent government would forget what it has done in early stages. They would try to manipulate people's memories. And that is where memory and power plays a crucial role in defining cultural memory of the social memory of citizens. Memory differs from history because history is objective, memory is subjective. It operates across generations. Yes, we've already seen this. So in short, memory is selective, it can be mediated, it can be political, or it can just be stable. And people's memories, in today's social world of social media, memory can be frozen, memory can become evidence. So that's memory studies. We look at other interdisciplinary approaches. Medical humanities is one area that has become extremely popular. I've spoken about it earlier too. There are many doctors who have doubled up as authors. Famous Sherlock Holmes author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Anton Chekhov, A.J. Cronin, Michael Crichton, Arthur Haley. Popular fiction. The final diagnosis clearly talks about an error that happened in a hospital diagnosis. A pathologist makes that error, and how a new doctor tries to reinstate the moral of that particular hospital, which has lost its credit. So it's a very beautiful book. It was written sometime in the 1960s or 70s. Much of what is said there is no longer in practice today because medical advancement has been prolific over the past few years. So we may not be able to relate to it directly, but that is probably one book that comes to my mind when we say medical humanities. And then, of course, violence and victim literature. We have war literatures, we have partition literature, the trauma that people have undergone. And then there's so many narratives, historical narratives. Ponniyin Selvan also comes within this purview as war literature, but not necessarily violence and victim literature. So, natural disasters, tsunami, based on tsunami. There's one very beautiful book called Higher Ground. It's a compilation of stories based on the true events that happened as an aftermath of the tsunami. So, this is another area that is coming up. So when we look at literature which has even traces of any of these, I think we can extend our study into that text through this approach too. And the video literature. Charlie Sanders has written a beautiful book called The Second Being. The Second Option. Now that talks about, that's a true story. She's now number 2 in Facebook, just under Mark Zuckerberg. She lost her husband when they were on a holiday in South America. He suddenly collapsed in jail. So till Option B, the title of the book is Option B, Sarah Sanders, and that talks about how she revived her life after his death and how she climbed up from being, almost a floor sweeper. From that to becoming number 2 in Facebook. Of course, she was educated. She got herself educated later, and then she became number 2 in Facebook. So that's a beautiful book that describes about how single women or single men can, evolve themselves as great leaders in the future. And then prison literature. This is very interesting. There is a poem by Emily Bronte. Would you believe? Emily Bronte lived in the mid-19th century, and she wrote a poem called The Prisoner. It's about a woman being imprisoned and how she's being taunted by the warden and visitor. They taunt her because she's a woman, she's not allowed to go out. She says, you can strangle me, you can chain me, you can put me within the 4 walls of this, yet I will feel free because my mind is free. You can never kind of strangulate my mind. Now that is the spirit of feminism. Even before the days of feminism, even before feminism as a word emerged, Emily Bronte had already spoken about that. So we have a whole series of different kinds of literature that's being written, and therefore approaches to literature also falls within these text space. Where literature, I don't personally subscribe to this because I do believe that it's harmoniously balanced. But yes, we need to accept the fact that where literature is here and so many writings, and this also falls within the the realm of gender studies and sociology. Graphic literature. This is very interesting because graphics have always been in existence. In fact, our generation people, our understanding of Indian history or mythology of Ramayana or Mahabharata comes from Amar Chitra Katha. But we always read them as storybooks. We have never seen them as, text for potential interrogation and research. To give you one very good example, Persepolis is a book by Satrapi. With the Iran war that is happening today, why Iranians celebrate the killing of their own leader. Now, if you read Persepolis, you understand why. And the entire book is written only in graphics, in comics. It's more like comics. The reason why Satrapi decided to do that is because if she had written them in word form, she would not have been alive to see the book published. And therefore, she chose the graphic more through images and very little verbal expressions in the text. So that's a book that's available online too. So I would suggest every one of you to read that book to understand the true history of, or the true reason why the war is happening now. The next approach is posthumanism. Now, this is a clear 21st century paradigm shift to literary studies. So human beings, all the while, whether it is the text, there is no text without an author. The author is a human being. The reader is a human being. It is being discussed among human beings. Now, that has completely changed with the advent of artificial intelligence. It's human technology interaction, and that is what posthumanism is about. So you have Renaissance humanism that talked about enlightenment of humanism, anthropocentrism, binary oppositions. Now, all these have evolved today into what we call as, especially in Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, very clearly projects how important it is for human beings to understand the presence of humanoids or the robots or technology communicating with us. And very often we find people losing their social relationship because people constantly sit with their wives and their interaction. Even the human-to-human interaction happens through technology, more through technology and less through face-to-face. Our interaction also happens through technology. So this is also part of the post-human scenario in literary studies. So post-human thoughts, we've always had this. Human beings, if you look at Panchatantra tales, it's through through the animals and the conduct of the animals that the two brothers were taught their models. Dissection, Machina or Frankenstein, all these are examples of human and non-human interaction. But this non-human has always been another animate entity. Animals and literature, Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm. All these, they are still within the realm of human and another animate entity. It is not with a non-animate or inanimate entity. Climate fiction, again, it's human versus environment, or environment colluding to teach human beings what it takes, to maintain the environment, to prevent the environment from further deteriorating. And then, of course, we have this gender fluidity, post-human feminism, or speculative and science fiction. All these place human beings not at the center, but on equal terms with entities that are not human beings. So virtual realities, simulation, themes of hybridity, altered consciousness, all these have entered they've literally bombarded the literary scene today. So we no longer deal with characters which are entirely human. We no longer deal with events that are, played out only by humans. It's almost like a cricket match played between the Indian team and a robo team of another world. So it's like, it gives you that scope for further imagination. I think I have 5 more minutes. Yeah. So this post-human thought has thrown open a whole world of possibilities, both for research and for composing. Digital literature, this is transformational. Now, most of the assignments that are submitted, we do not know if the student has written or it's ChatGPT. Because earlier when they copy from Wikipedia, it was easy to find out, because when they submit, even that edit within brackets will remain there. Or if they had referred to, there will be one link to hyperlink to another page, and it will say here with an underline, which is underlined. So we will know that this has been taken from, it was easy to identify pages. But with artificial intelligence, when Perplexity composes a text or ChatGPT composes a text for you, it's very difficult to find if they are plagiarized or original writing. Of course, those of us who know the standard of our language of the students, we will be able to easily find out. And of course, ChatGPT's writings are repetitive. It will be the same idea presented in different ways. Now, the students would not have bothered to kind of eliminate repetitions and then submit. So there are ways to find out, but there are also ways to hooping the readers. So when a new book is published, we do not know if it is originally written or ChatGPT generated. Of course, technology is now getting advanced to identify or to, flag plagiarized stuff from artificial intelligence too. But the possibility of, reworking ChatGPTs to make it look like original writing is always there. In that sense, it is transformational. But the transformational that we are talking about in digital literature is what was once upon a time available only as print is now available as digital. So the printed text and the digital text, the kind of experience in reading are completely different. They are not the same. In fact, we have audiobooks that give you a completely different experience. And in that sense, digital literature have become transformational because your experience in reading the text has undergone a huge transformation. So technology, media, new literacies, animism and indigenous futurism. So the kind of future that a student of literature from Tamil Nadu envisages in the next 10 years will be very different from what another student of literature from another part of India envisages in the next few years, which will be very different from the kind of future that somebody else in some other context envisages. So that will be completely different. And so you're going to look at a future for Tamil Nadu, which is different from future for Kerala, a future for Andhra Pradesh, a future for Telangana. We are looking at geography. There can be ethnic societies which can think of a different future. There can be religious communities that think of a different future. So when you integrate this kind of thinking with technology, spirituality with technology, ancestral beliefs, traditions, rituals that have been there is an interface between human and technology for every small thing that we do in our lives. That is going to change the entire world. It's going to change our approach to life and literature as a whole. And that I think is the mark or the step towards future. So digital narratives, electronic literature, post-human depictions in media, popular culture, cultural confluences, all these have become are here to stay, and they have become part of our own existence. We no longer look at any culture that can exist on its own with its roots firmly grounded. There is a complete confluence there is multiculturalism that is brought in, not only through human interactions, but also human technology interactions. Now that is what the future holds for us. So when this kind of future comes in, language changes, our approach to learning changes, then because language changes, today, code switching and code mixing to come up with what are called as portmanteau words, or even, the Tanglish, Malayalam English, Hindi English, all kinds of varieties. All these have come up with, especially the text language. Texting language is so different from standard English, and texting language is here to stay. Sometime back, we found texting language in answer papers. So David Crystal has written a book called The Great Debate, and how has he spelled it? TEP8. So that's texting language. So all these have changed, have modified, have transformed our approach towards literature and literary studies. Now these are things that are here to stay, and it is up to us to adapt ourselves to what is in store for us in the future. Similarly, translations. Machine translation, it cannot translate idioms in a proper manner. So idioms will go for a toss if we make our language highly idiomatic, but it is still useful. Machine translations are effective. Google translations are effective for technical translations. But when it comes to literary translations, figures of speech, he was a lion in the battle. When you say that, it would say a Google translation will automatically talk about presence of a lion in the battle. It will not talk about the warrior fighting like a lion in the battle. So these are ways by which our approach to literature and literary research have completely got transformed. Now, literary studies and literature crossroads, because there is a completely shift, a paradigm shift in, earlier it was interpretation, then slowly it became evaluated. Today it's experiential. It is how we experience our relationship with the environment, and the environment is not necessarily only flora and fauna. It can also be technical gadgets, electronic gadgets. So the digital culture, the interdisciplinarity has become a necessity today. It is not a choice, it's no longer a choice. There have been changes in the way we learn and assimilate ideas, from print to digital, from knowing from others to experiencing it, from reading a text to experiencing the actual way that it is being expressed. Now, all these have brought about huge changes, and our studies today should focus more on these, less on traditional theories. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I hope I have conveyed something that I thought was useful. If there is, if the session is open for interactions, I'm open to it. It's up to you to decide.
Yes, ma'am.
So let me stop sharing this screen so that I can